Hello everyone, welcome to this lecture on marginality and social justice. This lecture is part of your paper on media and margins. In this lecture, we will discuss the concept of marginality. The lecture describes the various types of marginalities, societal and spatial, with the help of suitable examples. It also elaborates the concept of social justice as a requirement of marginality. The lecture will explain the different forms of marginality and inequality experienced throughout different periods of time. In order to conceptualize social justice, it is important to explain the different types of inequality in different time periods, as this forms of inequality brings into light the constituents and elements of social justice. This lecture also discusses the theories of social justice propounded by different scholars. However, the lecture also gives brief introduction to the Constitution of India as an exemplary to social justice. Let us now discuss the concept of marginality in order to locate the significance of social justice. Now, we'll start with the concept of marginality and we'll try to find out its meaning and definition. So let us start with marginality. Marginality describes and examines the socio-cultural, political and economic sphere where underprivileged people have to fight back to achieve access to resources and participation in social life. The marginalized people are socially, economically, politically and legally overlooked, excluded or neglected. So let us try and define the concept of marginality. International Geographical Union defines marginality as the temporary state of having put aside of living in relative isolation at the edge of a system, and that system can either be cultural, social, political or economic, in mind when one excludes certain domains or phenomena from one's thinking because they do not correspond to the mainstream philosophy. This definition on marginality is considered to be dynamic one, as it sees that every region has the possibility to surmount the marginality experienced. Somers states that socioeconomic marginality is a condition of socio-spatial structure and process in which components of society and space in a territorial unit are observed to lag behind an expected level of performance in economic, political and social well-being compared with average condition in the territory as a whole. Let us start with societal and spatial marginality. Societal and spatial are the two major conceptual frameworks that define marginality. The societal perspective of marginality refers to demography, religion, culture, social structure, economics and politics in connection with access to resources by individuals and groups. The social structure includes caste, hierarchy, class, ethnicity, gender, and so on. Marginality emphasizes the causes of exclusion, inequality, social injustice, and spatial segregation of people in respect to the above discussed dimension. The spatial perspective of marginality refers to the physical and geographical location situated at a distance from centers of development and lies at the extremes of the poverty. It further examines the pursuance of physical locations on the livelihood of the individual living in an isolated region. Societal marginality therefore materializes and advances with time in varied type and degree under socio-economical and geopolitical situation it is also where one group oppresses the other. Therefore, colonization, apartheid, and ethnicity are assumed to be the examples of marginality. These processes restrict the access to the resources available in the distant land to overcome geographical isolation, which felicitate one to remain in the extremes or at the marginal level. For that reason, societal and spatial marginality cannot be separated. These are explicitly related to one another. It is not that marginality occurs only in the geographically isolated regions. It is also experienced by a group of people dwelling in the developed cities. However, marginality occurs in different magnitude and the type depending upon the physical and social settings. In the developed region, marginality is more prominent in relation to societal issues based on caste, class, hierarchies, gender, and accessibility to the healthcare, education, and so on. Whereas in the less developed and geographically isolated regions, people experience both societal as well as spatial marginality. These regions experience inequality or lacks in accessing the modern technology, infrastructure, communication system, and so on. Therefore, the marginality is also influenced by the role played by technology and communication in the economic and social sphere. The social conditions determine the societal marginality. The social conditions include poor livelihood, lack of resources, skills, and opportunities, constraints in the political decision making, inaccessibility to public spaces, and lower social status and self respect. Often, the mainstream excludes the marginal. The mainstream usually discriminates, stigmatizes, and ignores the oppressed in regards to race, caste, class, gender, occupation, economy, education, ethnicity, and religion. The marginalized do not have legitimate right to use resources and do not have any voice in the decision making process. Therefore, the right to use resource and decision making process is relational to the socio-political and economic inequalities between the marginalized and mainstream people. Let us now discuss spatial marginality. Spatial marginality is defined as inequality between the geographically isolated area and the major economic and service centers of development. The geographically isolated area is difficult to access due to lack of infrastructural development and thus remain distant from the mainstream developed areas. The geographically isolated area is also defined as marginal region as it is at the extreme of a system. Despite of the remoteness, there is also regional inequality in the geographically isolated region itself. The spatial dimension of marginality is a relative concept, where the distance between the isolated region and the economically advanced region is an important factor. Liam Graeber defines the disparities in the living conditions between the economically developed and periphery areas as macro-spatial marginality. In this case, marginality is a consequence of spatial disadvantage. Market forces like competition at the local and global level creates inequality. The locally produced goods, for example, have to face a tough competition and fight against the products produced by the machines in the metros. On the other hand, Somers coined the term microspatial marginality to represent the distressed localities within relatively small territories, such as the built-up areas of cities and metropolitan regions. This type of marginality is provoked by the supremacy of the dominant political and socio-cultural order. Thus, one's ethnic culture, migration status, and economic antagonism are the vulnerability factors of marginality. Somers defined situ spatial marginality as the inequality within small geographical areas. Here, the poor and the well-to-do households dwell together and are neighbors. The inequality is prominent in relation to the standard of living. Immigration status, labor segmentation, and ethnicity are the important factors that define this type of marginality in the industrialized societies. The margins or the distressed class have emerged among the urban population due to class differentiation and occupational segmentation. This distressed and oppressed class includes the porters, security guards, servants, and wage laborers. Let us now discuss social justice in order to locate how different marginalized groups survive in the society and how society helps them to fight back the atrocities faced by them. Social justice is all about providing justice to the distressed, disadvantaged, and deprived section of the society who have survived out of the atrocities of life in order to bring equality in the social order. It aims at providing equal opportunities to all the citizens of the society. Let us now discuss the concept of social justice throughout different periods of time. In the earliest period of Aristotle and Plato, social justice was simply applied to a particular group of people or a nation which intends to address the consequences of hierarchical inequality. The hierarchical inequality is basically related to the inherited inequalities. Therefore, social justice implies whether individuals have equal distribution of resources on the basis of their social status. During the period of religious proliferation, the religions like Islam, Judaism, Buddhism, and Christianity emphasize the significance of moral values of sharing, equality of treatment, and the evils of greed. The religious leaders and the rulers behaved righteously and were fair and just towards the common people. Their vision was for humankind and goes beyond the present life. Therefore, the idea of social justice goes beyond social status and recognizes it as a human value. But later on, this universal idea of social justice was least practiced and was undermined by the preachers of different religious institutions, which created hierarchies among the religious leaders themselves. The religious leaders held in competition among themselves on the basis of social status. Patriarchy was the dominant paradigm. Women and lower classes were not seen as equal citizens. Therefore, the social structure was characterized by hierarchy where the distribution of resources was based on the social status in society. Let us now look at the social justice during the early modern period of the 17th and 18th century. It referred to the consolidation of state power under the influence of the monarch. Thomas Hobbes saw that the creation of an external authority, which he referred as state, was essential to the maintenance of a just society. The state would formulate and implement laws in order to bring peace and hold back humans from destructing each other in the quest of self-interest. This concept of justice prevailed as industrialization and commercialization emerged during this period. Therefore, the state has the responsibility to implement laws and provide social justice and stop people from harming deprived sections. For Rousseau, social justice is related to individual liberty and freedom and equality of rights and opportunities to establish the relationship between different forms of humanity. Therefore, social justice emphasizes on the equality and individual liberty freedom as one's right. As a consequence to the American and French revolutions, liberty, equality, and fraternity became the slogan of the universe. It strived for the proliferation of liberty and equality in all spheres of life. Thus, the concept of social justice emphasizes on human well-being. There were relentless injustice and inequality in the 19th and 20th century due to industrial revolution. Therefore, Karl Marx remarked that humans are defined by social relationship which is determined by the economic structure of the society. This relationship, he believed, produces classes. He negated Thomas Hobbes' idea that human competition creates injustice. On the contrary, Marx argued that the political economic structure creates injustice, subjugation, discrimination, and exploitation. Marx was against the exploitation labor class. Therefore, for him, social justice will exist when humans will receive on the basis of human needs and not on the basis of what they produce. Therefore, the concept of social justice implies fair distribution of resources. Let us now examine the constituents of fair distribution with the help of different theorists. Theories of social justice. The utilitarian idea of John Stuart Mill reflects an unequal distribution on the basis of status. The rights of the disadvantaged were sacrificed for the good of the privileged classes of society. Rawls criticized utilitarianism as it benefits the privileged section of the society. He conceptualized distributive justice, which states that all social values are to be distributed equally unless an unequal distribution of any or all of these values is to everyone's advantage. The two elementary principles of Rawls' theory of social justice are: first, every person has equal right, which is extendable to the level of personal liberty and is attuned to the system of total liberty for all. Second, social and economic inequality should be arranged in such a manner that the disadvantaged gets the greatest benefit in the manner that the least well off people are made well off by providing unequal or greater amount to the people least well off. The social positions are based on fair equality of opportunity so that everyone in society has an equal chance of representing in society to make decisions about inequalities. The ideas of Rawls laid stress on the disadvantaged at the birth with undeserved inequalities. Thus, social justice relates to justice in a systematic form applied to society as a whole rather than individuals. It emphasizes unequal distribution on the basis of an individual's needs or requirements with a particular focus on the needs of the disadvantaged and the equality of opportunity. Robert Nozick sees social justice as entitlement. He regards justice in relation to three principles. First, justice in acquisition, the appropriation of unowed things as long as enough is left over for the others. Justice in transfer, the acquisition of a holding from someone who is entitled to that holding. And third, rectification. Any unjust transfers are to be rectified by compensation. According to Nozick, every individual has a right to own property and has the freedom to use it according to one's own choice. The state cannot intervene. The state will guard the rights of the individual to protect property. Further, he states taxation as unjust. According to Miller, social justice refers to the ability of the market to give what individuals deserve. His theory states that the individual creates their own rewards and therefore are responsible for their own actions. The actions of the individual are their own choices. Amartya Sen focuses on making a society less unjust rather than perfectly just. He explores social alternatives, ranking them based on the values and priorities of the community. He evaluates the efficiency of the institutions and actions which are more effective at reducing injustice. According to Sen, social justice is defined as an individual's capability to do things he or she values and the freedom of individuals to choose between different means of leading their lives. Sen's approach to social justice focuses on assuring individual capacities to gain optimal well-being in their circumstances. He defines poverty as the deprivation of these basic capabilities, such as being illiterate, being active in the community. Sen acknowledges that social arrangements have to make it possible for individuals to build their capabilities. For example, a right to education concerns not simply an individual's access to appropriate educational material, but the responsibility of government to provide stable presence of certain institutions and institutional framework. Sen's approach is consistent with and resonates with the concept of social inclusion. This idea of social justice emphasizes developing individuals' capabilities. Social justice in India. The concept of social justice is associated with welfare state. Indian society seeks to meet challenge of inequality by the legislation and with the help of the assistance of law, in a way achieve economic justice without conflict for an egalitarian order in the society. The Constitution of India tells us the scope and place of social justice as an aspiration of the nation. The former Chief Justice of India, P.N. Bhagwati, states, "Today, a vast social revolution is taking place in the judicial process. The law is fast changing and the problems of the poor are coming to the forefront. The court has to innovate new methods and devise new strategies for providing access to justice to large masses of the people who are denied their basic human rights and to whom freedom and liberty has no meaning." The concept of social justice, which the Constitution of India has engrafted, is related to the varied principles essential for orderly growth and development of personality of every citizen. Social justice is a vibrant tool to alleviate the sufferings of the poor, weak Dalits, tribals, and deprived section of the society and to raise them to the level of equality to live a life of dignity. Social justice is an essential part of complex of social change to relieve poor handicaps and to make their life livable for greater good of the society at large. The Constitution of India, with the help of laws, acts, and amendments, addresses the issue of marginality. Let us discuss these schemes and programs in detail. The Protection of Civil Rights Act 1955 and the SC/ST Prevention of Atrocities Act 1989 are two important legislations to address the problems of social discrimination, prevalence of social evils like untouchability, and the increasing cases of exploitation and atrocities against disadvantaged groups. The Act provides for special courts for immediate and just disposal of cases. The centrally sponsored schemes of PCR and POA Act were implemented in 1955 to ascertain effective implementation of these acts. Under the scheme, financial assistance is provided for relief and rehabilitation of the affected persons. As the practice of untouchability still prevails, either directly or indirectly, there is a need for stringent enforcement of the existing legislations along with spreading awareness. Let us now try and summarize what we discussed in the lecture. We learned that social justice deals with the eradication of all sorts of inequalities, which refers to the marginality of wealth and opportunity, race, caste, religion, distinction, and title. It aims at removing all inequalities and affords equal opportunities to all citizens in social affairs as well as economic activities. We hope that you enjoyed the lecture. For more details, please read the module carefully and attempt the questions at the end. Thank you.